Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Virtual Sessions presented by the DJ Sessions. I'm your host, Darren, and right now I'm in the virtual studios in Seattle, Washington, and coming in all the way from York in England, we have Arkley today on the show. Arkley, how you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Darren. Yeah, how are you?
I'm great. I'm glad you're here. We had to reschedule this interview, but we got you before everything hits the fan for October. And, I'm glad we got you on the show. You know, we were doing a little pre-show talking before, and for our fans that don't know much about you, you just recently started in the electronic music industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, fairly recently. When I was growing up, I was in bands. So when you said you were in Seattle, my mind went to Sub Pop Records and Nirvana and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the kind of records I listened to when I was a kid. Yeah, I've been involved. I was always like drawn to where bands got involved with electronic music. So it'd be people like Primal Scream or the Chemical Brothers, that kind of crossover between bands with electronics and kind of dance influences. So that was kind of my entry point. But I used to play in bands for a long time, and then I got more into DJing and yeah, progressed to what I do now.
And I mean, it said, I mean, I'm going over your bio. It said, in 2001, is that you launched Arkley in 2001? Is that when you actually started DJing, or was you were doing this electronic stuff before, and then Arkley came out of that?
Yeah, so I launched in 2021, so just last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's probably a typo in my bio. But yeah. So this project is really new, about a year and a half. Before that, I was actually involved in drum and bass. So I was part of a drum and bass duo, and that's kind of where I learned to DJ and kind of got into more of the dance side of things. But kind of, I guess, backtracking a bit. So I started out as a kid playing in bands, playing guitar, all that sort of stuff. And I was really a songwriter. So writing, top line melodies, writing your traditional songs, I suppose. Um, and then, so I kind of got into drum and bass because I was a writer, and so lots of producers would be looking for top liners. And my wife's a singer, so we used to kind of write top line vocals for drum and bass producers. And then I got into DJing and producing that music myself. And you kind of, it's like all these things, you get it gets sucked in after a bit, you enjoy it. So I got the bug for dance music and DJing through drum and bass. And then through COVID, I think a lot of people had a chance to kind of think, the clubs closed and all that sort of stuff. You think, well, what do I really want to do? And for me, it was like, okay, I want to carry on being a DJ, carry on making dance music, but I want to go back to those influences I had when I was a kid. So the Chemical Brothers, the Prodigy, Primal Scream, all this kind of stuff, and then start doing a new project, which was kind of a modern take on those influences.
I'm gonna. That's awesome. I'm gonna actually bring in a question because a lot of viewers asked my next question. I was just gonna ask.
Okay.
This is where does your artist name come from? This is from. Make sure I always love how these users spell their name in the chats.
Yeah.
MSG be with MSGB with. All right. Ask where does your artist name come from? Where did that come about?
So I lived in London, in North London, and the area I lived in was called Barnet. And I was looking for a name for my project. And I guess, like a lot of new artists, you have loads of ideas and you have a big list. And then you go and search on Spotify and you find everyone's got all these names already. No matter how random you think you're being or how clever or interesting, someone got there first. And I was on the way to a studio to do work on one of my first tracks. And I was driving from Barnet in London, and the neighboring area is called Arkley. So it's an area in North London, and it was kind of one of those things. I was thinking, what's my name going to be? All these names are used, and I'm driving along, almost like you see a vision. It was just a sign, I don't know, like Arkley Pub or the Arkley Social Club or something. I thought, hey, that kind of fits. And yeah, there's also my real name is Pete, and there is a church in Arkley called the St. Peter's Church, Arkley. So I don't know, I'm not saying that I'm destined for sainthood, but it kind of connected.
Don't you have to perform 3 miracles to become a saint?
Yeah, well, I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Awesome. Well, one of those miracles that I'm hoping has been a good journey for you to do was your Origins EP. Can you tell our DJ Sessions fans a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what happened when I kind of launched the project, it sounds like a cliche, but it very much was true with me, is that when I started the project, I thought, like, I'm not going to look at what's popular. I'm not going to look at what other people are doing. I'm just going to sit down, complete blank canvas, make the music I want to make. And the initial influences that I had were, like, I'm a massive fan of the Avalanches. So the first tracks I made about sort of 10, 15 tracks, were quite similar to the Avalanches' first album. There was lots of weird and wonderful, like, world music samples and funk and soul samples mixed in with my more kind of, house and big beat and rave kind of influences and all that stuff. And I released the first record last year called Music Over and Over, which has got that kind of vibe to it. But it felt like that was sort of almost something to get out of my system, just to kind of try those sounds out, try that style. And when I was thinking about how I progressed the sound, I was sort of feeling like I don't really see where I can take this. And I was working on a track in the studio, and for producers out there, probably know the Korg M1, kind of like a classic kind of synth. And I was messing around with that, and it has that organ preset, so everyone knows that the new Beyonce tune has got that sound. But famously on like Robin S and all that, Live in Joy, all these big dance tunes from the 90s have that sound. And I kind of, for fun, I just messed around with the track using that sound. I thought, this is kind of almost a bit silly, but I was having fun with it. And that led to me making a track which came out in January this year called Rave 92. And the whole thing, like I said, it was just a bit of fun, and it was referencing that early 90s rave thing. I thought it was a bit of a one-off, but I really enjoyed doing it, and I wanted to then find out more about the music that came before I was, I'm sort of too young, believe it or not, too young for acid house and rave. So I kind of but I was aware of it. The older brothers and sisters were playing it, and I kind of knew the songs a bit. So I made this tune, Rave 92. It really seemed to connect with people. And then I kind of thought, I want to go deeper into this style. So the Origins EP was my kind of exploration of the origins of my sound, like the acts that had influenced the Chemical Brothers, the acts that influenced Daft Punk and other of my big favorites. And that, I guess, turned out to be a sort of, acid house. It was all those kind of ravey things from the late 80s, early 90s. And that was like the blueprints. That was the way in.
Crazy enough, I actually started raving in 1992. And I was 18 years old, and I was tell the story kind of often that when I first started going to nightclubs, I was going to nightclubs here, but it was top 40 music, and hip hop in Seattle, or at least in America, grunge music was there, but there was the top 40 hip hop that was in the clubs. There wasn't a lot of electronic nightclubs out at that time, and my friends, I was working in a music store, asked me to go to this dance club with them, and I'm thinking, dance club, it's going to be something like what we're used to seeing, because I wasn't. I just turned 18, so I just started going to like I said, there was a club. They would play like 80s music and 80s music or 70s 80s music. But I go to my first underground club called the Underground in '92, and was an experience. I thought it was going to be like any other normal nightclub, and I went over and was shooting some pool in the back room. And when I came out, the dance floor, it was house. It was Donald Glaude playing this house music, and it was just. It's right in the middle of college town, right by the University of Washington. So you have a lot of students that are going, it was 18 and up to get into this club. And it was just, I had never seen a club like this go crazy. A top 40 club was a different style. Like rap, hip hop was way different than this electronic music that was being played. And it was shortly thereafter, they opened up a warehouse called NAF Warehouse, or NAF Studios,
Okay.
which was big. But the first rave I ever went to was called Green Eggs and Ham. And it was the Century Ballroom. What?
Is that from the Prince song lyrics?
I don't know. I just, it was Dr. Seuss themed. I know that because it's green eggs and ham is the book, but Green X and Ham was the name of the rave.
Okay. Yeah.
And that just sold me on electronic music culture from that moment, because at that time it was such a melting pot of everyone. There was no labels, there was no um, everyone was welcome. Everyone was
Mm,
free to be who you wanted to be, and everyone was kind of cool with everyone. Whether you were a jock, a goth, a nerd, a geek, a candy kid, whatever we
mm,
all looked like, we all just mished together and we're in this room partying, dancing to the music. Later on, you had your subsets go on, and as the music broke out, you had house, you had techno, and it was known as electronic music. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
as a whole. And then you started getting all these subgenres over the years that started breaking out. But it was a very, very pivotal year for me for electronic music in '92. So when
There
I
you
saw
go.
Rave '92, I'm like, that takes me back. Rave
It's a
'92. I
song
started
just for you,
raving in
Darren.
'92. Yeah. So I kind of just dated myself, I guess. But that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's
That's
all good.
okay. You
I mean,
know,
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
what jobs did you do? You mentioned you were in a band. You mentioned you were working in the drum and bass stuff. But what jobs did you do before becoming a DJ? I mean, were you always, is it music? Has that surrounded your life? Or do you have a day job and this is a side hustle and you're looking to flip the script on that?
Yeah, so I kind of going back to like my band days, I worked in call centers. So yeah, I worked in the complaints department of Barclays Bank on the phone. So you get all those times you phone someone up and say, "Hey, why is this money come out of my account?" or "Why is this not working?" I was the guy on the phone going, "Okay, I'll try and sort that for you." So I did that. I did a lot of kind of temp jobs. But funnily enough, kind of to go back a few steps. So I was in this band, which was kind of very synthy electronic band. So we played shows with people like the Presets and Robin and that kind of thing. So it was where the electronic kind of met live band. Um, and when that band was signed to part of Warner Records years and years ago. Well, yeah, so that would be about 2008 time. Um, and when that band split up, I actually retrained, and I trained, believe it or not, in doing law for music. So my day job is to work like advising artists and labels and publishers and stuff around music contracts and about licensing and live contracts and merchandising and all that kind of stuff. So I do that, but I kind of do that part time, and then part time I DJ, produce, and do the Arkley project. So and then I suppose alongside that I kind of do some stuff which is occasionally like writing music for film, TV, those kind of little bits and pieces to keep everything ticking over.
And I'm sure you've been following what's happening in the EU with the law. Although, I mean, my friend always talks about Brexit and all this fun stuff,
Hmm.
so I don't know how this is going to affect the UK, but in the EU with the DMCA, have you been? I guess the DMCA is a US based thing, but with copyright law over in the
Hmm.
EU, what they did is they just removed the safe harbor rules that would protect
Hmm.
these big companies like YouTube and Facebook and Twitch from
Hmm.
copyright violations. Now holding them liable, or if you're over a certain size, they still give little
Yeah.
guys the chance to start up. They don't hold them
Hmm.
liable. They give them the smaller companies. I think if you're under $50 million a year in business, they'll give you a safe harbor because you can't monitor all this. It's too expensive to monitor the copyrights. But the
Hmm.
companies are making billions of dollars. They're like, no, you're going to be held responsible now for the content that
Hmm.
goes up to your site. So these major players, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and all that, are having to go to what's called active monitoring. So
Hmm.
when you're live streaming, the chances of you putting a video on demand up that contains some copyright material, if that lives up there for a few seconds, they're now held liable for that, and the label can come in and sue them and say, "Hey, our content's on your site, and it's no more take it down and we get a safe harbor. It's we are now suing you." What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really tricky, right? Because I'm not sure people signed on to this chat want to hear too much legal stuff, but I'll give you a little bit of it. So in the UK, at least, a lot of these copyright laws actually derive from very old I suppose, ways of trying to legislate. Okay, so if you kind of imagine, I always think about like Tin Pan Alley, right? You know, it's sort of a guy with a cigarette, you know, writing lyrics, and someone else with a cigarette sitting down at an upright piano writing the music. You know, and it's very kind of archaic the way that it's kind of structured, and it's struggled over the last 50 years to kind of play catch up with technology. So you have all these different ways in which they try to take the existing framework and then fit it to constantly changing technology. And even something we look at ourselves, right? I think COVID's like completely accelerated live streaming and all. Even you were saying today, like, you know, I can add this stream to all different channels and suddenly it can just proliferate, right? So I think the issue is that you're taking very old ideas and trying to make them work within new kind of technological frameworks. And these big companies like Google and so on have kind of exploited that and said, well, look, we couldn't possibly monitor what's on our channels, when you know that actually they can. If they chose to provide budget to make sure that that would happen, they could. So this is where you get into an interesting kind of nexus between the legislators and then kind of business and commercial pressures and that sort of thing. So I think that it's one of these things where you have to walk that fine line between allowing people to sort of kind of protect their intellectual property by making sure everything's properly licensed, by making sure everyone gets paid that should be getting paid. But at the same time, there needs to, I think, be an element of flexibility, because like you said, you know, there are certain people that can't even get out of the starting blocks unless they're given a little bit of grace, if you like. So yeah, it's a very complex area. But I think it's something that you just always have to have in mind, what is it that you're trying to achieve for the technology? And if it's the case that there are big tech companies that are exploiting those people that are making intellectual property, making music, for example, then I think that's fair play to kind of hold them to account. But I think on the flip side of that, a lot of people, I know I'm one, right? DJs find it very frustrating that it's difficult to live stream sometimes. It's difficult to share your mixes because certain, unless you use Mixcloud or something, certain channels are not licensed properly. And so I think that knock-on effect can be too restrictive on people that are actually trying to innovate or trying to do something. And that's, again, you need to make sure that you don't entrench the existing kind of creators of intellectual property who are at the top of the pile at the expense of the new innovators who can't get started.
And you brought up a great example there of Mixcloud. I got the chance to interview the CEO about a year and a half ago. He actually found me online talking about copyright on another blog, on another podcast that his friend was listening to, then went over and listened to it. I was talking with an attorney out of LA about copyright. Mm-hmm. And then he said, you got to listen to this guy. You got to talk to Darren. And it was Nico from some Mixcloud came on and had a great conversation about how Mixcloud really is set up to win when it comes to this. The only caveat is, though, that Mixcloud will stream your live video, but they only store the audio. And getting the audio licensing, that can, while it's a difficult process, I'm sure they had a lot of time sitting at the tables with the 48 or 52 major companies that do all this and getting the okay from them on how the percentages and the splits and everything would work out, but they were only dealing in an audio conversation. And when you think about it from the standpoint of where we are at technologically, we're a video, right? We're a video live streaming. We're at video podcasting. We're getting into virtual reality now and augmented reality, and those aren't just audio platforms. So when you look at the future,
I think that's a really good example. So the old legislation, certainly in the UK, would kind of sets out the various exclusive rights that copyright holders have, right? And one of those is to copy music. Another of those things is to synchronize music with visual images. Now, they're two different rights. And under artist record deals and publishing deals, ordinarily the publishers and labels need to go back to the artist to get approval for sync licenses, but not for audio only licenses. So that's why you have that problem. It's too problematic. They can't grant a blanket sync license because then they have to go to their artist every time and say, hey, do you approve your music being synced? Even though it's perhaps just a DJ in a room playing the tune, it's still a sync.
I
So anyway,
appreciate you going down this. I know we can go down this rabbit hole and make the whole episode all about that. When you mentioned
well,
you
let's
do
not do
legal and you
that.
work with us, I had to dive in. I had to take it because
That's
it's
fine.
very far and few between. I mean, unless it's talking with an artist, that's been doing this for a while and understands the legalities of it all. You know, we can go down that road. But a lot of artists just don't understand that. They think I bought the tune off Beatport. I have the right to use it. I paid. I get to use it. And it's like, that's not how it works.
Sadly
And
not. Yeah.
unfortunately, I wish there was some bigger education. I think a lot of people, like you said, though, when they jumped online in 2020, started
Mhm.
finding out about the legalities of using music. It was
Right.
my phone probably I probably fielded 150 people hitting me up in the first March to April, May.
Mhm.
Even looking at my own servers, like, am I protected? And that's why we took a step back in 2020 and weren't streaming in the beginning. We were getting ready to go back to the front page of Twitch, and
Mhm.
they were like, da, da, da. If we do this, know what kind of headache that could cause for you with all your videos. Because we had 450 videos on Twitch that were in our video
Mhm.
on demand, all with red flags.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
we go to our website and we have like 1,300 videos over on our website. They're like, you might not want to go to the front page. That's going to put a big spotlight on you. And
Yeah.
you're going to start
Exactly.
getting some
Yeah.
cease and
Yeah. Yeah.
desist letters. So we took a step back and go, okay, let's make sure we're okay. And if we
Mhm.
aren't okay, what are our contingency plans to make
Mhm.
sure we can keep doing what we're doing?
This
And
is the thing. This is the difficulty, Darren, because you get a lot of people. I'm sure people watching this now just don't get. It doesn't make sense because it's based on such old ideas, old frameworks. You feel like they really should just start again. But even if you do, in 5, even 2 years, 3 years, it's going to change again. But yeah, it kind of helps from time to time. Although I think sometimes it's a hindrance because I'm like, I know I can't do this, and if I do it and I get caught, I I look even worse than others because people like we know that I should know better. So,
yeah,
but hey, look, I'm not the only one. I am. I actually work with Judge Jules. So
okay.
if you know that name, he is also a music
Uh,
lawyer as well, kind of
I
bizarrely.
believe I've had Judge on the show before. Mr. Judge, Mr. Jules, the Judge. Actually, I think I have. I'm going to check. I know I've had Judge on. I know I've had him on the show before. I swear I've had him on the show. Not too long ago. I'm actually pulling this up right now. G-U-D-G. Judge.
Judge
Come
Jules.
on, Judge. Judge Jules, 6/17/21. Yep. He's about due for his 6-month interview. Thanks for
There
reminding
you
me.
go. There you go.
Yeah,
Well, you say that for
absolutely.
me.
Now, great interview, great time. But we were talking a lot about how fast the industry moves and technology on our end as art. Well, I guess I'm not an artist, but I'm a video producer, and it moves really fast in my land too. But
Mhm.
as an artist, technology moves very fast in DJ land and in producer land. If you could think of something that's not on the market today, but in your vision would be really awesome to be out there, what would that be?
Well, I kind of take a different view of all this, and this is why one of the many reasons that I become so immersed in early '90s rave culture and rave music is um, so like one of my favorite records is the Prodigy Experience, right? Which just turned 30 this week. Apparently, it's 30 years old. Um, and I think I kind of got really fed up of a lot of music generally, but particularly electronic music, which is perfect in inverted commas. But I think people just spend too much time obsessing about the technology. You get that kind of tyranny of choice. Um, and I remember when I was making drum and bass music, being out at a club and chatting to someone, and they were starting saying, "Yeah, so I like to kind of put my mix in mono at under 200 hertz," and I'm just thinking, I mean, maybe great, but what about the vibe of the music, right? You listen to some old tunes and they sound like crap, right? But they've got a real atmosphere about them. So I actually like a simple setup. I don't like too many options. I like to be limited and think, well, how am I going to make this? I've got an idea for a track, and it could be a very simple bit of inspiration at the start, a sample, an idea, whatever. And I just kind of like to work with limitations. So I guess in terms of things that would, yeah, I don't know. I think if anything, I'd like to have, you almost go back to like, like an 8-track or something. I think, well, I've just got one drum machine, one synth, and one vocal sample. I got to try and make something out of this. I think that kind of challenge would be quite, exciting. I think I'd like that kind of, like to be faced with that. Like less is definitely more in my view.
You mentioned rave culture. Did you get into rave culture in the 90s, or was this just homage that you paid to rave culture in the early 90s?
Yeah, so I mean, I was kind of, a bit too young to be in it at the time. So it's more something. Well, I studied music at university, and it always sounds a bit weird saying this, but I did my dissertation on club culture.
Okay.
But it was on, I guess, club culture like really broadly. So I did a big bit on goth culture. I did stuff on punk. I did stuff on the mods and the rockers in the 60s. And it's all, I'm all just absolutely like fascinated with how music links with context, and it links with, tribes and all that. And I kind of think it's quite sad these days. A lot of that tribalism has kind of gone away, and people will, you ask someone, what are you into? And they'll be like, oh, I kind of like a bit of everything. And I think, a generation ago, it'd be like, no, I listen, I'm a punk, or I'm a rocker, or I'm a heavy metal fan or something. And I kind of miss that to an extent. But yeah, as part of those studies, I did a lot of reading about different kind of cultures, and I read about acid house. And funnily enough, actually got on my bookshelf here. This is like one of the books that what am I trying to do here? This is one of the
Adventures
books
in Wonderland.
Yeah. So
in 3D.
Yeah, I kind of just found the stories and the kind of the whole like reaction in the UK, reaction to like Margaret Thatcher, to kind of capitalism, to all the kind of yuppies in the 80s and all that stuff. It was just a complete cultural change, as well as that combining with the technology becoming more easily accessible, etc., etc. That I find all of that really exciting. And like I said, going back to your question about technology, I kind of want to almost have that atmosphere about what I do. It's not trying to kind of slavishly recreate the music. It's about trying to kind of harness that sort of sense of spontaneity, energy, excitement, and do it in a modern way.
I mean, you have to think, with the advent of the internet, you came up right up to about the 80s, and then the personal computer came out, and then we started getting online in the 90s. And, I think that's where I could see the blurring of the lines. Being born in 74, you're right. It was the rockers went here, the discoers went here, the hippies were over here, the people doing drug, this culture. And then, like I mentioned earlier, in 92, I felt in my first rave that I went to, it was all the cultures. It was it was a party. Like, we're going to this rave, it's a party. And you had the goth kids, the punk rockers, you had the jocks, you had, the students, you had the dancers, you had the candy, and it was all put in this room. And seeing this interesting mix of all these people coming together, there weren't the subsets yet. It kind of started melting it all together through this thing called electronic music. But then obviously everyone started getting online. You had the .com boom, and now it's get a computer so I can get online, so I can have email, and wow, I can go to this website and find out this information, which then led to social media, and then which led to us having, the ability to not have a Discman or a Walkman in our pocket, where it's one cassette with one artist with 12 or 13 songs, and going to an iPod and being able to put 1,000 songs in your pocket, to then doing video in your pocket, to then obviously the iPhone, giving you the ability to access information anywhere in the world in your pocket. Now, these devices, and with the growth of that social media, and then also distribution platforms like YouTube, coming out, and other video platforms, and then coming into Twitch, which is now the prominent streaming platform. And now we got the metaverse. And what's that going to be as a platform for socialization, passing information? Because it's highly, like, even podcasting, that you talk with some of these podcasters that have been doing this since 2003. I started in 2005, but you have podcasters who have been doing this since the first time you could put an MP3 on file and attach it to an XML document, and people could subscribe to their shows, and there's no regulation there. There's no one spot. You put a podcast, you put an audio, you get your own server, put a podcast on it. There's no audio monitoring. There's no protection of, I mean, unless you're doing hate content or something bad, but there's ways to find servers to put stuff up. People can subscribe to that content and get content where there isn't a media block on it anymore. When I started in the game, we had public access television, we had radio, and we had broadcast television. That was, I mean, you had bulletin board systems with dial-up, you know, 4800K baud mode. I remember watching the movie Hackers, and they're like 26.6K mode, like dial-up mode. I'm like, that was fast, like in that movie. But those are the three you had print media too. Those are the kind. There was gatekeeping there for information dissemination, and now that's opened up. Like, I liked when you said that there is no tribalism anymore in set culture. You kind of like, oh, I like a little of this, and I like a little of this, a little bit of this. We were talking pre-show about, one of the things we do with our silent disco, silent concert technology, and how I relate that to being a foodie going to an all-you-can-eat buffet. If somebody said, what kind of food do you really like? I'm like, well, I like steak, I like lobster, I like Asian food, I like Korean, I want pho, I want curry, I want, I like all of it. So go in and get something to eat, all of it. And that's where, adapting with the times, I would go to a nightclub and I'm stuck with that genre of music for the night. But if I had the option to go boop and click over and have another DJ, but still be at the bar, socializing with my friends, grooving to that, I think that's where things are going. Choices, I guess, is what it's come down to. Is, did choices destroy the tribalism?
I think that's the point. Yeah, I can see why that's appealing, but I kind of on a different level. I am kind of maybe taking this conversation down a serious route, but I think some of this has an impact on people's mental health. I think that just that pressure to make decisions all the time. There's something I think quite nice about having those decisions taken out of your hands. Like you might be able to hear from my accent, it's kind of gone a bit now, but I'm actually from Scotland, and growing up, we used to go to what they call ceilidhs, right? Which are, I don't know if you know that term, but it's so it's like Scottish country dancing. I can't even think of a film, a movie where you would see it, but it's kind of, people know Braveheart, right? So all the Scots, we don't paint our faces, but we wear kilts and we go and dance, right? And it's a kind of centuries old tradition of doing that. So even, it might sound funny, but even when we were, in our teenage years being ultra sort of cynical and whatever, it was still something that we'd get together. You'd have your friends, and then your parents would be there with their friends and all that stuff. It was a big kind of family kind of get together. And the music was ceilidh music, Scottish traditional music. And it's not the coolest thing. I would never listen to it outside of that environment, right? But I think there's something really, important and really kind of life affirming, really valuable in bringing people together for a shared purpose, for a shared, whether that's a shared music or a shared film or a shared experience of some type or the other. And so, I mean, I think the technology is really cool. I love the idea of like a silent disco. And I mean, I've seen it at some festivals where they have like a DJ, two DJs, one versus the other, and they've got to try and win over the kind of people with the kind of the tunes. All that stuff is cool, but I don't know. I think sometimes people feel a bit overwhelmed. Like there's a choice for everything. It's not like, what shall I watch tonight? How many people have been on, I don't know, Netflix, Amazon Prime or something and gone, I don't even know what I want to watch. There's just endless, and you scroll for like 40 minutes trying to find something. Yeah. And
better than doing TikTok for 4.5 hours though, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. All these things are true. I don't know. So I suppose that there's, again, coming back to as part of the process for doing this Origins EP, it was, I kind of wanted to immerse myself in the world of, I don't want to become a nostalgia act, or I don't want to live in the 90s, but just get a sense of where this music came from, because I think it's as much about the atmosphere. And I think there was something about that. It was like you said, all these different people who might at home listen to goth music or metal or rock or whatever else, coming together for a shared purpose, for a rave once a month, once a week or whatever. And so I suppose, and I think that that's quite an important thing, that people do have some kind of consistency where they do come together, and that choice is taken away almost. It's like, this is what we're all going to do together, and we're going to find the magic in that.
Well, what's crazy is, what popped in my head there is, I mean, I'm 48 years old, and started all this. Obviously we were talking about
Don't look at
pre-internet.
Darren.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I don't have hair and makeup yet, but I'm working on it. But no, I mean, kids nowadays are literally, parents are going like this: throw a device in their hand, and that kid has access. If there's no parental controls on that device, they're supposed to be watching kiddie videos, and it's like they have like when I was a kid and we wanted to watch cartoons, it was after school, they were done. It was Saturday morning, they were done. And then it's get out of the house and go play.
Yeah.
We didn't. I mean, if we wanted to sit in our house, I'd sit around and play with Legos or something, or we'd go over to the neighbor's house and we'd play with our He-Man toys or GI Joes or whatever. But I grew up luckily I grew up in a suburb area that had forests and swamps and as far as the eye could see. So we could go out and build forts and be out in the woods and be out in nature, or ride our dirt bikes and go to the bike track. And video game systems, yes, the Atari was there. The Nintendo came out in like 87-ish, 86, 87-ish. But nowadays with the modern day, everything's in the cloud, and I can buy that game and get that game, and I can network and talk with people and play these massive MMORPGs and be online for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, but it's that instant access, need it now generation. Oh, you don't like Blue's Clues? I don't know if you have kids or not, but I've dated some people that have kids, and if it's not Blue's Clues, it's Dora the Explorer. If it's not Dora the Explorer, it's Diego, and it's always something in their hands. How if children are being raised like that, to their attention span being here, how do we get their attention span to say, I want to focus and be in just one environment, and not have so much of the food buffet kind of analogy or music buffet analogy.
Yeah.
I think it's, and now we get into identity, crisis, of things of that nature. How do I identify if I am not focusing 80% on one thing or thing? I'm focusing 3% here, 3% here, 3% here, which could lead to attention deficit disorder, which pharmaceutical companies will like that. But I'm not going to go political in this episode in any way, shape, or form. We're talking about the pharmaceutical industry. But, I mean, it just really, it's how, rhetorically speaking, how do we reel it back? How do you dial it back as a world power now that we're all kind of connected?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the thing is that there's a lot to be gained from going deep on stuff, right? And again, I think one of the questions that came up in the chat I can see was, would I ever think of doing different types of music? And yeah, I definitely would. But it's almost that that's been my downfall, is that like many people, I love all sorts of different music. Like I said, I came from a rock background, and so you kind of think, well, I've got the access here to make any kind of tunes I want, and I could get them out and distribute them worldwide pretty easily and cheaply. But I think there's something, what I'm going to struggle with, I know, with this project, is trying to keep it relatively not narrow, but kind of go deep on stuff, find ways to I guess it comes back to that limitations point, find ways to write material that is not just your surface level, hey, well, let's play it writing some rave tracks for a little bit, then change and do something totally different. Because I think I've always been really attracted to artists of any type, filmmakers, music artists, whatever, that invite you into a world. So I mean, I, like millions of others, a big fan of Stranger Things, and they do a great job of kind of bringing you into that world. And I guess that for me that's what I would like to see more artists do, and this is what I'm going to try and do, is to try and go deeper on what I'm doing, make it something which does bear repeated listening, something like a Prodigy record you're still listening to in 30 years time. It's not the instant hit, like let's get a sound going on TikTok and be a flash in the pan. it's kind of trying to do something which is great on a surface level, but kind of, I don't want to sound too pompous, but I guess something that stands for something, and it does. You can have a sense of attachment to it, like, okay, there is more substance to this. So, for the Origins EP, one of the tracks in there is called "Back to Love," House 89. Yeah. So a reviewer said the track title says more than I could in my review. So I thought, yeah,
Nice.
that sums it up. But if people want to check it out, there's a video for that, and I work with the same guy that did the video for Rave 92. Both videos are our attempt to kind of do a modern version of those kind of VHS visuals, the rave visuals like for Fantasia and all this stuff. So my idea is to try and go deep on this music but bring it in on different levels, so there's a visual aspect to it. I do all my sleeve design and styling for photos and all that. For me, it's really important to have a world where people that want to find out more, want to kind of immerse themselves in it, they can do that. And I also then act as a bit of a kind of gateway to find out other stuff. So on my socials, I'm always kind of sharing things that are inspiring me. I'm not dreaming this stuff up from nowhere. I'm kind of, like, I'm just thinking here, I've got this, got busy bookshelves, but like this is another. So, it has got all these kind of flyers from old kind of raves from the.
Oh, wow.
These are old school rave flyers. So, it's kind of, that's what's inspiring me, but I kind of want to share that as well. So people that hopefully my music, they'll hopefully like the music, and there is more to it than just the music. But also as an artist, I want to try and say, hey, this is where I get my ideas from. This is what's inspiring me, and this is why. And hopefully that creates a bit of a community around it, which has got a bit of depth.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you use Stranger Things as a reference in there, because when you use the term suck in and you get into the character, you get into the development of it. And I was just thinking, those kids played role playing games. And when I watched that, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a geek. I'm very proud to say I'm a geek and a nerd. No problem down the line. But I just thought about it like, yeah, they do kind of suck you in as you're a non-player character, as you're watching any movie, but they really do suck you into this kind of role-playing experience in this world where you're like, all of a sudden you're with these kids and they're on this journey, and this really crazy crap's happening in their town with monsters and alternate dimensions, and they even cross and kind of educate the audience on like the mind flayer, and they're rolling dice and fireball, and they're wizards, and the whole D&D experience. It's really awesome that you brought that in, drawing that in. But I got a question for you. And I'm going to actually, it's coming from K Down Saber, actually. And the question is, how would you define success as a DJ? Let's put / producer, artist. Is it Beatport top 10 hit, a sold out tour? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, something that's always stuck with me whenever that question has come up was like back in my kind of band days, I was playing a show supporting an act who had just kind of broken. They were really hyped, and they were playing a single launch, right? And this was like an emerging act, and they were playing a venue in Leeds, which is a nearby city. And I think there must have been, say, 500 people. So they're new act, their second or third single really blew up locally. 500 people in, sold out. It's a great night. And I remember speaking to the singer at the bar, like before the show or after the show or something like that. And I was like, hey, this is a great night. How do you feel about it? And she's like, yeah, I just want to get to the, I think it's cool, but I just want to get to the next level. And I just remember thinking, wow, how can you not just be enjoying this night where there's a bunch of, a bunch of fans here, and this is a real moment for you. And in truth, that's the sort of thing I've kind of struggled with, because I think like everybody, you sort of feel that there's kind of constant desire to achieve, to play a bigger show, to stream more tracks, to kind of have more, I don't know, followers on social media, whatever it is. And I think it's very dangerous in a way. I think that way of thinking combined with the globalization is also an issue, because back in the day, you kind of grow organically. As a DJ, you might get some some sets in local clubs, and then you'd maybe go regional, and then you'd gradually build and build and build. And in terms of releasing records, you might press up 500 vinyl and sell them to people in the local area, and it would grow kind of. And that's, you would just look at your immediate kind of peers. Whereas right now, you put your tune online, and this, I don't know, the stats vary, but say 20 to 60,000 tracks uploaded to Spotify every day.
I think it's 60. Is it 60,000 a day, or is it 60,000 a minute?
God, yeah.
No, I recently just saw that. I just saw that. Listen, well, I just saw that article recently.
But I think the point what I'm making is that for a lot of young artists, and my kind of, aside from my artist career, as a part of my job, I do some mentoring of young artists, and I think that's something they often struggle with. It's like they've made this piece of music, they feel massively passionate about it, they go through that process that a lot of people do, which is they just put it out into the world and get 100 streams and whatever. It's not set the world alight, and they then become very despondent and feel like it's all too hard. And I think, so when you ask a question about success, I know this is going to sound massively cheesy, but I really think it's got to be about making the music that you enjoy, because in 10, 15, 20 years, when you're talking to your grandkids, you're not going to be like, hey, I got 100 likes on Instagram for this photo. It's going to be like, hey, here's the track I wrote. Does it still sound good? Does it still, I don't know, stack up really? So I guess first and foremost, success for me is to be able to make records that I'm proud of, and I want to share them with people. I want to stand behind the decks in a club and drop it and not find that and mix it into something else and think, God, my mix sucks compared to this producer. It's more of a creative thing, and then to enjoy that process. So I think so long as I'm making music that I kind of feel proud of, that excites me, and I'm enjoying the process, and to me, then everything else is kind of the kind of go for the ride. Even us chatting now, it's kind of me making music gives me an opportunity to speak to you thousands of miles away with all these people listening to us. That to me is all part of it, because I think if you focus on something being the marker of success, probably by the time you hit it, you'll be looking at something further away and then further away and further away, and you just never enjoy the process. I kind of think, well, obviously I want to kind of play big shows, I want people to be interested in what I'm doing, but I don't have this is what I'm, these kind of markers of what I'm after. It's like I want to keep enjoying it and keep liking the music I make.
If I ever said, once I get on broadcast television, that's it, I did it, I'm going to stop, I wouldn't have continued after 2002. So 20 years later, here we are live streaming and doing the technology. You're right. It was what is that level? I think you're right when you say once you achieve that, you're already going to be, once you're getting that goal, you're already working on the next goals vicariously without knowing you're working on the next goals and the next step. And if somebody went out there and go, oh, I just want to make one album, that's it, I'm done. Are you really in the game? Are you really, you did it? Are you going to tread water on that now for the next 30 years of your life, saying, I made an album once?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't play music, I don't do anything after that. I made it, and I just twitched and went to selling lollipops. Oh, okay. How did it's is that still a success? That how do you measure success and what other people's level of success? The one thing that I find that is kind of despairing, though, is the sense of ego or entitlement that comes with varying levels, and usually the higher up you go, the food chain, that I found, the lower the ego becomes. And I don't know if that's a psych out game that people like when you have an athlete isn't going to go out there on the field and say, I'm going to miss the ball. I'm going to miss the ball. You're not going to throw a dart at the dartboard gun. I'm not going to hit the bullseye. I'm not there. You got to have that. And that build up, though, I am going to bring the best. I am going to bring fire. But as you get up there, it's kind of like, okay, I'm already kind of made it at this level. I can let that ego go, and I don't have to have that I am good because now I am getting, maybe, I don't know if it's the praise, the accolades, the bookings, the downloads, whatever it is. Go, hey, I actually did something and it
Yeah,
was really good because the public is telling me it is. I don't have to keep that
I think that it's
competition
kind of
factor
like, so
in play. If that
I
makes
guess
sense.
like it does, yeah. I think like, so through my work, I spend time with quite a lot of well-known people and kind of see them, I guess, behind the scenes, right? And what I would say is that, first of all, like, as these artists become global artists, there's a huge team behind them, right? So it's not, and I don't think anyone really thinks this, but there is this sense sometimes that you're just looking at an artist and that's it. But generally speaking, you're looking at an artist, a management team, labels, publishers, agents, there's a huge infrastructure around it, right? Even down to lawyers and accountants and insurers and all the rest of it. And so I think to kind of be able to achieve that kind of very top level of success takes a lot of planets to align, and then to retain that level of success, it's quite difficult keeping those planets in alignment, right? um, and I think that if you're, I think you're probably more likely to achieve that level of success and maintain it if your ambition is kind of aligned with, or is based on, making great music. And I know that, again, sounding totally cheesy, but I think as soon as any artist thinks, I've got the formula, the fans want this, they'll lap it up, I'll keep doing the same stuff, that's game over. Or as soon as they start to say, oh, I can spot a trend here, so I'm going to change up and do this thing or whatever else, that's where all the wheels come off. I think that if you're looking for success and you want to kind of maintain it and enjoy that whole process, it's got to be just focusing on making great music, working with good people. And again, like, I know this might all sound quite idealistic, but I believe you can do that. Yeah, you just have to focus on those things that are important for you, and then it becomes much easier to sustain it. You're not in it constantly exhausting yourself trying to achieve artificial goals or trying to please various different people. And I think you'll find that, I was at a show about a month ago with a client who was headlining a big UK festival, and we were backstage afterwards, and I was just saying, it was like being in the eye of the storm. It was very calm. It was kind of like, there's nothing to prove here. You know what I mean? We know what we're doing. We all know our part in this. And I don't know. I think that's it. I think maybe you're right. Like, emerging level is a sense of ego. I need to prove myself. I need to kind of impress people that I'm important or something like that. But actually, I think the higher up you get, the more self-confident people are, and they don't feel they need to prove it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And then one things that obviously in our society or in the world society now that's happening out there is you're getting into where you see the trolling, the cyberbullying, the gang mentality, the cancer culture, that's happening on people that are just like, why is this happening? I put something online and it's being misconstrued 85 different ways. And you gotta be careful what you put online nowadays. Or you're at an event and you might go like, I might be in the show and I might do this, but from somebody's camera angle, it might look like if they've taken buzz, they go, oh, I caught Darren picking his nose on stage. And it's like, I was just rubbing, I was like, I got something on my nose, but in the picture they capture on their phone and then it goes viral and they're like, Darren picks his nose on stage, It's like, what the heck, and those kind of things you got to be mindful of. But interesting topics of conversation. We can go down, we could have opened up a lot of rabbit holes and cans of worms, but I just want to say thank you so much for being here today, Arkley. I've had a great time talking with you. Couple last questions before I let you go, though. This is a big one. Big one. Pizza or hamburgers at an after an hours after you do a show?
It's got to be pizza. And in fact, after this, I'm going to go and have pizza, because I should have say I'm in the UK. It's the evening here. So yeah, it's pizza time for me.
Awesome. Pizza time for you. And if you wanted to let or anything else you want to let our DJ Sessions fans know about before we let you go?
No, just check out my my new EP, the Origins EP. It's got a kind of like an acid house influenced tune called Back to Love on it. It's got a high energy breakbeat tune called Burning, which is a lot of people compare to the Prodigy, early Prodigy stuff. And then I had a go at like a rave influenced UK garage track. So it's got a bunch of different stuff influenced by that music. As I said, there are a couple of videos around for those things. But yeah, follow me on TikTok or Instagram. It's at Arkley Music, both of them. And yeah, get in touch. I love chatting to people and sharing music. Hey, nice one. Yeah, so yeah, get in touch. That's it.
Awesome. Arkleymusic.com. It has all the links there and everything.
It does, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We will definitely be following up with you on our 6 month, on what we have our 6 month agenda. Every 6 months, we want to stay in touch with everyone that comes on the show, because you're going to have a long career doing this stuff. I can tell it already. You're going to be at there doing this for a while. So thank you again for coming on the DJ sessions today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Great to chat to you, Darren. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for questions. I know we haven't managed to get to them all, but if you want to message me separately to ask questions, just hit me up.
Yeah, that chat room can start to move quite fast with our list of vetted questions, which you can get access to if you send an email to info@thedjsessions.com and say question list request. That'll get you into the forum and let you know it's vetted questions, because we only like getting vetted questions. Sometimes you can get some crazy questions out there in the chat land that we try to make sure don't pop into the stream. But on that note, don't forget to go to our website, thedjsessions.com. Find us on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Meta, Twitch, Instagram. We're out there, the DJ Sessions. Also find us on Roku, Amazon Fire, Google Play, soon to be Apple TV, and in virtual reality at AltSpace, and download our mobile app. But you know what? You can find out all that information at our website, thedjsessions.com. Share it with a friend. Share it to all your friends. Share it to strangers, thedjsessions.com. I'm your host, Darren, coming to you from the virtual studios in Seattle, Washington, with Arkley coming in all the way from York in the UK for the DJ Sessions. And remember, on the DJ Sessions, the music never stops.